Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Climate Investment Lifecycle series, hosted by the Global Climate Finance Center in partnership with ADGM Academy. It's a pleasure to have you with us today for this final episode, where we completed the story we began earlier this year back in May. In episode 1, as you know, we focused on how to unlock capital. Then in episode 2, we focused on the structures and instruments needed to deploy that capital. And today in episode 3, we move to the very beginning of the pipeline, focusing on early stage climate solution, innovation, and the conditions needed to position these solutions for investment. This discussion actually is especially relevant to the work we do at GCFC through the Innovate for Climate Tech Coalition, launched at COP28 and now hosted by the Center. Innovate for Climate Tech aims to bridge innovation and implementation by creating pathways to pilot, scale, and deploy climate solutions across emerging and frontier markets. So it serves as a global platform linking innovators, investors, and markets to drive impact in both mitigation and adaptation. Which brings us to today's session, where we focus on what it takes for the UAE to advance its innovation ecosystem and how policy, venture capital, and entrepreneurship come together to turn early concept into viable investable opportunities. And we are joined today by speakers who represent exactly these 3 pillars. We have Sonia from Venture Souk, who will be moderating today's session, Fahim from Seafood Souk, and Tara from Frontier 25. So thank you all for being with us. And before we begin, I would also like to thank ADGM Academy for their continued partnership throughout this series. And with that, I will hand over to Rauda for a few more welcoming words.
Thank you so much, Taradi, Sarah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rauda Al-Dahiri, Head of Research and Development at ADGM Academy. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the final episode of the Climate Investment Lifecycle series titled Unlocking Early Stage Climate Solutions in the UAE, brought to you by ADGM Academy in partnership with the Global Climate Finance Center, or GCFC for short. Over the past month, this series has taken us on a journey through the full spectrum of climate finance, from pipeline to portfolio, and from innovation to impact. Today's session brings us to the heart of where every transformation begins, the early stage ecosystem, which is where ideas are formed, tested, and ultimately shaped into investable solutions. At ADGM Academy, we see this as more than just a discussion on finance. It's about empowering the innovators, entrepreneurs, and change makers who are driving the UAE's transition toward a sustainable future. It's about building the frameworks, partnerships, and capital pathways that allow great ideas to evolve into scalable, climate-smart ventures. This focus aligns deeply with the UAE's vision for climate resilience and economic diversification by strengthening the innovation pipeline, particularly in areas like adaptation and water resilience. And we are not only advancing sustainability, but also creating new opportunities for growth, employment, and long-term competitiveness. Through the Climate Investment Lifecycle series, ADGM Academy and GCFC have sought to bridge knowledge with action, connecting global expertise with local ambition and turning insights into tangible outcomes. As we conclude this impactful series for 2025, our message is clear. The UAE has both the will and the capability to lead in climate innovation, but collaboration remains the key. So today, as we hear from distinguished speakers representing policy, venture capital, and entrepreneurship, I invite you to reflect on how each of us can play a role in unlocking the next generation of climate solutions, not tomorrow, but today. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to a thought-provoking and inspiring session.
Thank you so much, Rauda. Thank you so much. And for our audience, please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box or chat at any time. Sonia, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Excited about this session, a sector that I'm obviously very passionate about. My name is Sonia. I'm a co-founder and general partner at Venture Souk. We're an early stage thematic venture capital platform where I lead our climate investment practice, specifically looking at opportunities at the Series A and Series B stages, mainly across MENA and Asia. So let's kick off. Obviously, the title is Unlocking Early Stage Climate Solutions here in the UAE. Maybe I'll set the context a little bit. We often talk about mitigation technology, so anything that's got to do with renewables, batteries, carbon markets. But I also want to make sure that we address adaptation technologies because that's really where climate impacts are already being felt most acutely. As you all know, since a lot of you are based here in the region, here in MENA, water scarcity, food security, and ecosystem resilience are not future risks. They're very much present realities for us. We've experienced them and we experience them every day. So the question really is around how do we mobilize early stage innovation, capital, and policy to address them and look to position the UAE as a real global test bed for climate solutions. And so that's the lens that we're going to go in with. Before we kick off with some questions, I would love for our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves. Tara Al-Marzouki from Frontier 25, formerly known as UICCA, and Fahim Al-Qasimi, founder of Seafood Souk. Tara, how about we start with you first?
Sure. Thank you, Sonia. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank GCFC for inviting me to speak today. It's a real pleasure. My name is Tara Al-Marzouki. I am a program associate at Frontier 25, formerly known as UICCA. I still have weekend brain. I'm a program associate and I've been here for almost 3 years. Frontier 25 is an independent nonprofit climate action organization, and we focus on advisory with a mission to advance climate and sustainability solutions. We do this through a couple of different things, and most of it is evidence-based advisory, market acceleration with climate technologies, and strategic alliances that deliver measurable impact. My focus personally during my role is supporting global climate technologies to enter the UAE market and understand the full landscape, whether it's funding or investment, pilot opportunities, sort of everything on the spectrum that climate tech look for, even local ones that want to progress in the UAE and advance in the MENA region and the UAE. It's very important for us to support them in any way. Most recently, I've been working on a policy brief on climate tech funding for Series B and beyond, and those later stage tech that really need support for frameworks and regulations. And it's lovely to be here today. I'm happy to connect with any of you after the call.
Thank you. Go ahead, Fahim.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Fahim Al-Qasimi. I'm the founder of a company called Seafood Souk, a UAE technology company that helps answer the question, do you know where your seafood comes from? I've had the pleasure and the challenge of building a environment-focused technology company here in the UAE, and very proudly now exporting our technology all across the world. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Fahim. All right, let's start with more of a macro question. And Fahim, maybe I'll start with you on this one. And Tara, obviously, feel free to chime in. All three of us have been obviously in the climate space for a while now, and obviously based here in the UAE. Fahim, in your view, how do we ensure that climate isn't seen as reactive, but really as an investable frontier, one that drives opportunity and growth and not just risk management? And I really want you to hone down, obviously, from the entrepreneur's perspective. From my perspective as a VC, oftentimes have to remind stakeholders here and beyond that I am not a philanthropy and that I am investing in scalable tech-enabled businesses that are looking to address climate change through different modes. Would love to hear kind of your perspective as we kick this off first.
Yeah, thanks, Sonia. For those that haven't heard me speak before, I'm known to be extremely direct. So please, anything I say, don't take it as me being facetious or difficult. But I think we're here to have the real conversations. I think that's the objective of this final episode. When we started Seafood Souk 7 years ago, we didn't want to be in the climate space. It wasn't there is climate funding happening, so let's build a business because we want to be in a particular space. I decided to found this company because I actually cared about what's happening in our oceans and I wanted to address them. But I think we're hindered by two particular issues in this field. Number one, the word climate is extremely abstract. And I think we need to be a little bit more cognizant of the taxonomy we use, which is a very fancy way of saying, what are you actually doing? to help the planet, right? And hone in to make sure that when you are in climate, there are so many subsectors within it. I have the pleasure of sitting on committees within some of the NGOs. It's a complex space, and a lot of people don't understand it. So let's and I think sessions like today help raise the awareness of what do we mean when we say climate tech, for example. A lot of people like myself, when we started the business, didn't know we were even in the climate tech space. We didn't think that addressing traceability challenges in supply chains or digitizing fisheries to tackle illegal fishing was actually something that would help the climate. So that's number one. I think the second challenge, and I say this with nothing but respect and love for my country, but we come from a very generous part of the world. And I think being in a generous part of the world, a lot of entrepreneurs may think that this space, the ability to provide solutions and technology specifically to solve some of the climate issues that we have, is something that is left for government to fund out of public budgets with policy solutions. And I think what we've learned slowly over the last 7 years is, especially now working directly with the government of the UAE, is they're thrilled to see product market fit for something that makes commercial sense, but at the same time also solve some of the climate challenges we have.
That's very clear. And I agree with you. I think climate is a broad word that's kind of used and maybe overused. And just to give an example, for example, when I talk about climate with regards to our climate fund, specifically, we focus on biodiversity restoration, supply chain traceability, hence why we're an investor in Seafood Souk, energy management, climate fintech, climate risk management. So it can take all these different verticals, and it's up to you, if you're an investor listening in, to decide whether you want to take a broader kind of stroke in the types of opportunities that you eventually want to look at, or whether you want to be a bit more niche and subsector focused, and kind of double down on any of the subsectors that I mentioned and more. So that's very, very true. Tara, on your side, given where you sit, we're in one of the most water-stressed regions globally, yet we're also one of the most technologically ambitious. And so how do you feel that paradox can be turned into a competitive advantage for what I'm going to call climate entrepreneurship?
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. I think the UAE has always put climate action front and center from Allah yarhamah, the time that Sheikh Zayed was, creating this foundation for us. Water scarcity is part of the bigger long-term vision I think that we need to tackle. And I think the challenge of the region being highly water stressed and has created a powerful incentive to actually innovate and incentivize those, from desalination to smart irrigation to circular water systems and sort of data-driven management systems that we have created or we are deploying and creating that space for opportunity. I think for entrepreneurs, the paradox comes from a competitive advantage in a way, where solutions are developed and are tested in one of the most challenging sort of landscapes in the world. Our climate's very difficult we can't test in, for example, Singapore and the US and say, yeah, it'll work in the UAE. It's a very different dynamic in climate here. So I think it's a great incentive in looking at a competitive advantage, because once we develop that sort of impact here, the solutions are easier to deploy elsewhere in the MENA region and in the world. I think the UAE turns necessity into innovation-led opportunities, and it's something beautiful that we are able to do. And I think it sort of builds up both resilience and economic development. So it's a great opportunity.
Okay, so just to follow that thread specifically around the challenges and the opportunities, and I'd like both your perspectives here, both from Fahim, kind of started in the UAE, kind of taking over the world, and then Tara, from your perspective of trying to bring some of these technologies into the UAE. If you think about kind of early stage technologies, they tend to get stuck in what we call the pilot trap, right? What structural, and maybe Tara, you can kick off for this one, but like what structural or policy barriers do you see that prevent scaling for these companies, and how do we overcome them? And I'll add just a bit more context to this. For the entrepreneurs, and I know there's some who've joined, I know it's a chicken and egg conundrum, right? You approach me and you're like, I need money. And then I tell you, I need to see some traction, show me some pilots. But in order to get to the pilot, you need the money, and then you're kind of, what happens? What do I do? So, Tara, I'm sure you've seen this as well from kind of your experience. And so
Yes.
what are some of these structurals or policy barriers that are preventing some of these companies to scale? And can you offer a solution with your magic wand to them?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think we get that a lot. We've worked with over 200 climate tech startups from locally and from around the world. And I think the biggest challenge that we continue hearing, and we're trying to solve is the policy barriers and the fragmented sort of structures that there are just within the Emirates. And that's no fault of our country. Obviously, it's something that we're developing and we're creating. It's a new space for us in general, the whole climate action space. But I think the biggest barrier is access to finance is one thing, but the structure of how we get the financing and in different stages of wherever the tech is. I think we need more coordinated support, whether it's private-public partnerships, but also bringing in those ecosystem players, for example, like Frontier 25, where we're non-government, we're independent. So we have that convening power to be able to say, okay, let's sit in a room with every player in the ecosystem and say, what can we recommend to overcome that? I think the biggest challenge is integrating mandates instead of just incentives. I think having a mandate that is structured and that is unified and harmonized between the Emirates and the MENA region, inshallah, one day, will support climate tech coming here and actually becoming commercially viable and scaling up to a part where they're able to actually have traction and show that to people like Venture Souk and to gain that funding.
And Faim, your perspective, given that you also had to go through the kind of pilot phase, right?
Yeah, look, I'm gonna just take a contrarian opinion to
Spice it
really
up.
not spice it up, but the sound that you made when you said, when you get frustrated, it was like me in my
I've been
office,
watching Mo Amer, that's why. That's the sound he makes.
But it is a feeling that anybody that's an entrepreneur on this call will have felt.
Yeah.
I would turn the system a little bit on its head, and I appreciate I speak from privilege here because I have a strong network within government. What Tara said about the fragmentation in some of our policymaking in the UAE, which is just the nature of our bureaucracy, is actually an opportunity. It's instead of, if something doesn't work in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi or Dubai for some reason, that doesn't mean that there aren't 5 other Emirates that may be interested in this. And I point my finger a lot of entrepreneurs, and it took us a long time to think through this. And I had to really step into my own company and be on the ground in all of these meetings. Number one, you have to speak Arabic. You need some Arabic speakers that you need to hire. This is a government that is an Arabic-speaking government, and it takes a while. I find that entrepreneurs tend to really overlook the importance of learning the market that you're in. If you were going into the EU, you would be looking at CSDDD. You would be looking at all of the EU laws that are coming out and how do I operate within this regulatory framework. And when they come to the UAE, there is a little bit of a blasé attitude from entrepreneurs that don't take the time to learn. And yes, Frontier 25 will help, and great investors like yourself, Sonia, would help. But I think entrepreneurs really, if you're in this space, which is extremely regulated and has a huge government angle, you can't walk in there just because you think you've got commercial opportunities and then try to make it work. Our first success was in Sharjah, not only because I'm from there, but I deeply understood where the challenges were and who the policy decision makers were. I had to discount the first project that we did. And I'll talk in real clear examples so that this is not hypothetical. We wanted to digitize artisanal fisheries. Nobody does that around the world. In Sharjah, it's operated by a commercial entity that buys the fish from the fishermen. We basically said, if you do this, this may increase the value of your seafood. We will slowly develop this technology alongside of you. Because of that, we'll give you a massive discount to it, but let us roll it out. And it took a year. Once we proved that it could be done, I had an audience with all of the fishermen in the UAE at the IUCN, and then with Her Excellency, the Minister of Climate Change and Environment, where they said, you proved it can be done. Now we will give you the mandate to roll this out across the whole of the UAE. And I don't think that if you were to do this in Europe, in the US, in Africa, South Asia, or Southeast Asia, it would be any different. You have to understand the market you're working in. You've got to get that first project up off the ground. We earned revenue, maybe not as much as we wanted. But then when you've got those proof points, governments are generally risk averse. They're not venture capitalists. They're not commercial companies that look at, okay, well, this may increase sales or reduce cost in this particular way commercially. They don't have that risk appetite. And I'm not going to tell you that the UAE is going to change the risk appetite of the government overnight. You have to be, this is why entrepreneurship exists. We built it here, we built it in South Africa, we've exported technology to the US now, all built on a pilot that we did in Sharjah with the government.
And I saw a couple of questions around blended finance, and we will address those in a bit. But that's just something, heads up, Fahim and Tara, that I'm going to bring up in a couple of minutes in terms of your view on blended finance and maybe some of the gaps that we have actually in our own capital stack here in the region. But meanwhile, I just want to stick to this kind of chapter that I have around still the challenges and opportunities. And again, for both of you, I think there's a classic tension, innovators move fast and regulators ensure safety and equity, but in this space, delay itself has a cost, right? And so is there a way to redesign regulatory sandboxes or, as you said, Tara, public-private models to reward that responsible risk-taking? And, what is, from your experience, Tara, with Frontier 25, what is the right balance between regulatory oversight and innovation freedom, especially when you're dealing with critical sectors like water, food, and supply chains?
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. Yeah, as you said, I think delays in is a cost in time, and the more that you wait, it could be a missed opportunity for something. I think regulatory sandboxes are key, and I think flexible sandboxes that allow innovators to sort of test their solutions in controlled areas that are with clear guidelines, but also sort of, how can I frame it in the right way? Having a structure, but being able to be a little riskier and sort of test it. That's what it's about. I think in the UAE, leaders are already embracing the approach of trying it with ambitious targets and pilot projects and public-private collaboration, and just to create that environment where innovation is encouraged without compromising long-term sustainability. I think just to sort of, in short, it's the right balance for flexible oversight and accountability and incentives for responsible risk taking, I would say, is and creating a space where innovation can move fast but safely. I think is the key to creating data and showing improvement and impact that we can take forward.
Yeah, okay. Let's segue then from kind of the piloting aspect to the value chain. And this is where I'll address some of the questions that were raised in the chat. The valley of death, or what we quote unquote call the valley of death, is where most climate technologies fail, right? It's between prototype and commercialization. What have you both seen or experienced firsthand as the missing links in our climate value chain? Whether it be, we just talked about the piloting aspect. I think we're a bit too rosy on that front. I think there's still some very tangible, kind of challenges for climate startups to get those pilots in with the off-takers. But whether it be funding, testing, partnerships we kind of talked about, and policy demand signals specifically. And so maybe I'll just bring in the questions. There's two questions from Kamil and Hassam around kind of when you think about the capital stack. Obviously, I'm a VC, so I sit on one part of that stack, but there's other, obviously, ways of raising capital, including blended finance. Funny tidbit, FYI, is even for us as fund managers, when we're raising, for example, a climate fund, if you're GCC based, you're actually not eligible for a lot of this funding from the DFIs, from the development finance institutions, because people deem that we're based here in the GCC and have enough access to capital. And even though we're deploying in the markets that they may care about, including like Jordan and Morocco, etc., just de facto the fact that we're based here in the UAE actually precludes us from accessing those funds, even as a fund manager, if that addresses your question, Kamil. But so, Fahim, on your end, kind of from a fundraising journey standpoint, can you maybe run us through that? Was it pure equity? Was it a mix? Did you take in grants? was it self-funded at the beginning? Maybe you can just walk us through some of that. And, you know, again, you're always very blunt, which is why I appreciate you so much. Like, what are some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, I think like I will be blunt. I have nothing to hide, and I'm extremely proud of how we managed it as a company. I think first and foremost, the start, I actually was the first investor, right? So the start of the business was very much how do we raise as little amount of money as possible, and then we went through a phase where we tried the valley of death model, and it nearly ended the company. We took on way too much capital, hoping that money equals people, people equals work, right? And that doesn't happen in all industries. I think if you're in B2C, very much, you know, access market shares very quickly and all the rest of it. I think resilience, if you're in our space, in the environment, in climate, and I'm keeping it specifically quite broad, is extremely important. So take on as little money as possible until you actually get the mandate, and then spend as little amount of money as possible to make sure that you can go through those peaks and troughs of regulatory shifts, right? And I think those are not in your control. Now, a couple of notes on this that I need to make extremely clear, and I can say this because I'm an Emirati founder. Number one, if you think that you're going to respond to policy by providing a solution, you're already too late. This country is global. This country sources the best technology from anywhere, every corner of the world. If the policy is already out, you're already too late, because if there's somebody that's better funded in other markets, they will choose excellence over local. And I don't expect any country to change that. It's about, you know, top-notch technology. So don't wait for the policy to change. We operated in a space, Sonia, and you know this well, where we manage the peaks and troughs by other revenue sources. So what we made sure, we had to be an actor in the supply chain to actually prove that the technology worked. And I will admit that we were almost 7 years too early in developing our technology. And we had those pivots along the way. There was about 2 key ones that happened. We were also a COVID company that shifted our strategy for 2.5 years to respond to it. We made good money doing it, but we had to repivot back to the core now that AI has introduced, it can reduce the marginal cost of delivering these services. We don't need as much money to deliver what we do. So I would say blended finance, frankly, here, you are right, it won't work. We actually operate by now that we have provable technology, we actually apply for grants overseas where we are just the technology component of that. And we work with partners in markets that do get that blended finance for us to deploy the technology. But I think,
can I just jump in, because this grant mechanism question I've talked a lot about with, you know, some of our friends and peers here in the UAE. Why, and we by the way also looked at grant mechanisms even for us as we were fundraising, right? Why do you feel in a country that is so generous, as you said earlier, that I mean, there's the RDI grant that was just announced like not so long ago, but why do you feel that it's still missing here? Why do you think that's still missing?
I don't know. I don't know if I can. I'm going to be very honest here, and this is Fahim's view, not the government's view. Please don't take this as gospel nor as anything other than Fahim's pontification of where I think we are in the world today. I think number one, we live in a part of the world that is extremely challenged by humanitarian causes. So number one, I think even personally in my own giving, as little as I can give, it's very much focused on the humanitarian causes, and climate comes second. That's from individuals, that's from institutions that are in the region. So that's number one. Number two is domestically, our tax regimes are slowly changing. And I think you have to give the United Arab Emirates a few years to develop tax deductible approaches for the private sector to play that role in the midterm. The real question now is, as an organization, let's say you're a large private entity here in the UAE, you're a multinational company that's headquartered in Sharjah, Dubai, Abu Dhabi. Why would I give a grant towards climate financing over humanitarian cause? And where's my tax return? These are businesses at the end of it. Or where's my tax break as an institution? If you operate in somebody's supply chain, so for us, we're in the seafood supply chain, for example, we're already eyeing up those companies, knowing that within 3 to 5 years, and you have to think that long term, that these organizations may get a tax break by helping funding some of the projects that we do. For now, there are clear, international policies around grant giving, specifically in sub-Saharan Africa, East and West Africa, Southeast Asia. We're focusing there, and we're saying we will provide cost-effective technology for this grant program. We're not the ones writing the grant. We're actually inserting ourselves as a technology solution into other people's grant writing.
Interesting. And Tara, I'm just going to bump off the question to you again, just as a reminder, again, from the perspective of international companies looking to expand to the UAE, what have you seen as them experiencing as the missing link in this value chain? Or maybe also even maybe if you have anecdotally like some examples of companies that maybe had missed expectations or mismanaged expectations, what they thought they would find in the UAE and did not end up finding in the UAE.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think for us, we're always on the other side, and we're hearing the perspectives of founders, and I think mostly the ones that are international, they go through our program and they get the sort of cultural education or awareness of how to deal with businesses here, whether it's funding or the government, and then they also hear about, okay, what is the tactical and the sort of more technical approach of doing things. But I think a lot of them sort of struggle when it comes to when they're sort of TRL 7 or 8 and they're getting more mature than early stage. I think they get taken aback when investors are more risk sort of worried to invest in that, and the entrepreneurs think, oh, the UAE is a great, it's a progressing ecosystem, and they're growing and they're developing at such a fast pace that they're sort of expecting finance to come their way just at an instant. And as Selection said, we are very generous, and that's sort of the culture, and that we've rooted that in our how we speak and how we act. But I think it's sort of the mindset shift and the behavioral element of it on both sides. Like for us as Frontier 25, we don't fund technologies. We don't have a fund. We don't give out grants, but we support that process. And us being the convener of the investors and the government players and the policymakers and the tech together, I think that's a really powerful aspect that we offer. And being able to do that has sort of boosted a tech that needed a pilot opportunity. They had everything that they needed. They were a local entity in Dubai, based there, and they didn't need anything else except for a piece of paper to test their solution on the roads. And it took them 2 years with our support, with policy and advocacy and convening the right people. But I think people usually are very focused on how they finance it, but they also need to look at linking the policy frameworks with that too, because it's a combination of both. It's a holistic view. It's not just, okay, once I get financing, everything's going to go well. There's a stream and it needs to be solved that way.
Can I just echo something here, because Tara's inspired me to say something. The absence of non-dilutive capital and very generous giving in grants can also delay an entrepreneur's target of commerciality and profitability. So yeah. I turn the question back to you, Sonia, as you invested in us. Was it easier for you to look at companies like Seafood Souk and others in your portfolio when we were so commercially driven at the early stages? Because you then at least de-risk to say, well, they may not make the impact that I necessarily want at the scale that I want, but at least I know my capital is protected from an investor's perspective.
No, 100%. I mean, when we look at deals from a diligence standpoint, we have 2 scorecards. So we run, various different thematic funds like fintech and climate, etc. But the commercial scorecard is actually exactly the same, whether it be for the fintech team or the climate team. What we have on top of that is actually the impact scorecard. So in order for it to make it to the next level of diligence, the company has to meet both thresholds, both commercial and impact. And so obviously when we looked at a deal like Seafood Souk, you had both. And that's how you made it to, our IC and then got investment in the end. So 100%, I agree with what you're saying. I do, and again, I'm going to follow Fahim's lead here in terms of bluntness, and I'm also French, so I tend to be blunter than most. I definitely think that we have a problem here with regards to the capital stack. And I think it's wonderful that we want to attract all these wonderful founders from around the world, but we've reviewed about 450 deals across the MENA region. Very, very difficult. And again, I'm not saying quantity is quality, by the way, but for people from outside often who tell me, well, I don't know if you have enough pipeline coming out of MENA, that's not true. There's a lot of entrepreneurs trying to build great things, but they don't get very far because of the lack of funding. So I do think that the capital stack should be the area of focus, because I think it would serve both Fahim and Tara's work and make it a lot easier. Because if we figure that out, then you will be able to attract more founders from abroad, and you will be able to develop the local ecosystem further. Because there are major funding gaps across the capital stack with regards to the sector. We're just sitting on one part of the value chain, which is early stage climate, right? But there's a funding gap before that, so it's great to have accelerator programs, but where do these companies go once they graduate? Oftentimes they're too early to come to the VCs, right? So are there angel groups that want to focus on the sector that can kind of help them out in order to get to the level where they can actually go approach the VCs? Then the VC comes in, and there are not that many of us. Most of the VCs in the region tend to be generalists. They will do a token food and ag deal here and there, but it's not their area of focus necessarily, right? So I would love to see more venture souk type sector focused funds, expand and accelerate over the years to come. That would be my dream, is that there's 20 of us who can share deals and exchange diligence notes, et cetera, on all these great companies being built. But the fact of the matter is that's not the case right now. And then after we come in, there's another funding gap, which is afterwards. What happens after Series B and C? And I guess fine, maybe eventually you will, you're already at the B now, but like eventually you will get to that point as well. Like, are there off takers for us that we can kind of pass the baton to as well? So not that I have a magic wand, but if I did have a magic wand, I would really make it kind of my mission to focus on how do we best build out the capital stack for this sector to make sure that A, we can attract talent, and B, we can support the local talent as well. So that's my 2 cents, and actually it's kind of a good segue as well for the next topic. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna ask you a question, just because I'm known to annoy people and change the way things are done. But a question to maybe you, Sonia, as venture capital, and Tara, from your sort of vantage point, because I see this now, and let me tell you what entrepreneurs are thinking. We're very fortunate. We created technology in the UAE that nobody had created. We're ready to go global. But when I sit with my board of directors and with the management team on our risk register, is policy shifts, right? Europe is very different than the US today in terms of where policy is going towards, climate, the environment in general. What is a priority? We've seen our market in the US actually be delayed now 2 years, 3 years, because we don't know where it's going. For yourself and for Tara, what do you tell an entrepreneur that is losing hope in the ability to go global because of those policy shifts?
Tara, why don't you jump in and I can give my 2 cents?
Yeah, thank you. No, that's a great question. With a lot of the tech that we deal with, we get that a lot, and they say we don't really want to invest our time in the UAE. Like, we don't even want to bother because we're just tired. And we sort of tell them it does take time. Things do happen very quickly or very slowly here, and it's hitting that sweet spot of being able to say, okay, we have everything in place, we just need to get it done. I think for us with Frontier 25, we try and make sure that we link and bridge the gap between policy and technology, and not look at them in silos. We try to bridge that gap and make sure that everything that we're doing, because climate adaptation, for example, is one of our key priorities. And what we started doing is looking at the research and best practices around the world and saying, okay, how can that be applied that it will work in the UAE context, and make sure that the tech that we're bringing in fits that purpose. It's not a one fit for all. And we make sure that we have a lot of evidence-backed research, and make sure that we take policy recommendations from entrepreneurs, from VCs, from ourselves that we've done with our own research, and go to government or go to policymakers and regulators and say, okay, this is what's missing. We need this to reach our goals. We've created these ambitious sustainability targets for 2050, for 2030, and we won't get there without the right tech. And most of the time, the tech is global, and we need them to come here. So we try to reassure the sort of our portfolio that we speak to that, we're working towards it and we're trying to fix it. But obviously, we need tech like you to be in our portfolio to show the government or show policymakers, okay, look, we have what we need. We just need to make sure that we can test them properly. And yeah, I think it's bridging the gap between policy and tech and making sure we hit that sweet spot.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from my perspective, Fahim, for international companies, so we make 20 investments. A lot of them are global, actually. And so we have helped some of them expand here to the region. I guess linked to my previous question, a lot of my job is to manage expectations. I think that especially with international entrepreneurs, they have this misconception that there's this pot of gold sitting in the UAE that's waiting to be deployed into the sector. And it's not necessarily the case. So I think like managing expectations while also encouraging them to explore the market by making the appropriate introductions to either off-takers, potential clients, potential investors. It might be individual investors, family offices that may have a strategic interest in in investing into the company and helping them set up in the region. That's kind of a lot of even for companies that I don't invest into, by the way. Like, so if there's a lot of companies that are either too early for us or even too late for us, I still take conversations. I still take the calls with them. I still have the conversations. I kind of also, I guess, am kind of like Tara in the sense that I'm trying to kind of connect the dots for them, because either there's a spectrum of entrepreneur, they're not interested like in the region at all. And I'm kind of there saying, actually, you should be interested in the region. And these are the reasons why, and these are the introductions that I can make for you to actually explore. It's almost like a, soft landing by Sonia program that's unofficial. Or it's the other spectrum where it's like a company has already identified the region, and then it's kind of saying, okay, like, don't just think about coming to the region to capital and to fundraise, because it might be harder than you think. However, there are some strategics that we could introduce you to, and there's some off-takers and potential clients that we can introduce you to as well, so that you can make the case internally for actually taking your business from the US. This happened, for example, with an SF-based business, and we helped her explore expansion to the UAE, and that's happening now. And she just did the Hub 71 program, and like she's made like over 10 trips to the region now. She's really kind of drinking the UAE Kool-Aid and really thinking of actually opening a second headquarter in the region. So I don't know if that answered your question completely, Fahim, but still keeping the hope alive in whatever way I can, while also being practical and realistic, which I think is important.
Fantastic. No, thanks for that. And the UAE Kool-Aid is called Vimto. That's what we drink here.
Vimto? Okay.
That's the first thing I thought of.
Okay, that must be an
Sorry,
Emirati
Sonia, back
thing.
to you. Back to you, Sonia, for...
I just want to check with Sarah. Sarah, it said we have 5 minutes left. Is that correct? Or because I have a couple more questions.
Yeah, it's correct. Please go ahead. Thanks for asking.
All right, so I got to be quick. All right, we're not going to go into talent and IP. So if you're interested in that topic, maybe that'll be for the next series that GCFC will host. So let's take a more kind of, again, in line with the hopeful angle that we just went through, kind of the future. If you each could design one bold UAE initiative to accelerate innovation and investing into this space, so basically I'm giving you a magic wand, what would that one bold UAE initiative be?
Tara, you have to go first. Mine is very short, so I'll tie it up at the end.
Mine, I think, has been oversaid, but I think a fund of funds that's structured properly would do so well. I think if it's directly tied to sort of government procurement policies, climate strategies, being able to create that magic wand and zap it forward, I think would be great. If we combine sort of government concessional capital with private institutional investors, and that would de-risk like high potential but risky late stage technologies. And I want it to be focused on late stage tech to sort of show that process and progress a little faster and give the UAE and the MENA region a bit more hope to say, okay, we can adopt and these sort of strategies.
So just to add to that, so who, if you're managing a fund of funds, whether it be a hybrid one, which is funds and direct, or whether it be pure fund of funds, is the premise that your LPs would be who?
Oh,
something to think about. All right, we could take it offline.
Yeah.
But it's something we could discuss. All right, something to think about. Fahim, over to you.
So I actually recently mentioned this to representatives from all of these companies. But today, one of the biggest challenges is that we tend to expect as entrepreneurs that our biggest client in this space is going to be government, when sometimes the solutions are best served to the private sector. I think the avenues to reach them and some of the support that we can get from the private sector, specifically for UAE tech, sits in the hands today, or the access, I should say, sits in the hands of a handful of companies. Two of them are Etisalat and Do. There's no company in the UAE that doesn't work with either Etisalat or Do, and they could be a door opener if they have a strong viewpoint on tech. And I spoke to both board members and CEOs about that topic. The other companies that I turn to are your Oracles and your Microsofts. There's not one organization that doesn't have a relationship with these large tech companies. And if these large tech companies want to support local innovation and open doors, they're the access points to getting young entrepreneurs that have provable tech. It's not at the super early stage, but to really be part of the ecosystem as they are in the United States and in Europe. I think I point the finger at the CEO of those, and they are my friends and stuff. So I'm cautious that I'm not trying to throw them under the bus. But I would turn to these companies and say it's time for you now to sort of support the entrepreneurial space here and find the tech that you think is worth it, that's operating on your systems. We're using all of their infrastructure anyways. I've spoken to Google, I've spoken to Microsoft, open some doors for these young entrepreneurs that want to start scaling.
Beyond some of the startup programs that they've launched, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, I think the early stage stuff they've done super well. But if you want to start exporting UAE technology, I founded this company with the hope that we would be exporting technology from the UAE to the world. Nobody else came up with the ideas we came up with. It's completely new tech that nobody does globally. We've won our first client in the US after 2 phone calls. We serve South Africa, we serve Europe. Nobody's doing what we're doing. That makes me really proud. We're not copying somebody else's business model. Now my question is, okay, well, how do I prove that you can build, scale, and export technology from the country? That's where my laser focus is. On my deathbed, my hope is that I have inspired the next generation of Emirati entrepreneurs and people that choose the UAE to be home for them to innovate here and scale globally.
Wonderful, wonderful way to end the session. Thank you both so much for your time. And for those listening in, I hope that this session provided you with food for thought as we collectively look to build out the climate tech value chain for our region, but also beyond. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Fahim and Tara.
Thank you so much, Sonia.
Thank you, Sonia. Thanks to all our speakers for the excellent discussion, and to everyone in the audience for joining us today and sharing your questions. You have been pretty active, so thanks for that as well. And during this episode, we explored the opportunities and challenges shaping early stage climate solutions in the UAE, highlighting how policy, capital, and entrepreneurship can come together to support innovation and accelerate climate action. And also a quick reminder for our audience, participants who attended all 3 episodes of this series will receive a certificate from ADGM Academy. Just another quick one as we close today's session. I would like to highlight that GCFC will have several activations from now through mid-January, including during Abu Dhabi Finance Week and Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, where our annual meeting will take place. These are invitational events, but all participants are welcome to register their interest. And also we encourage everyone to sign up for the GCFC newsletter to stay informed about upcoming webinars like these and initiatives. I will actually share the link in the chat right now, so you can subscribe directly if you are interested. All right, here you are. And so that said, we look forward to continuing this series next year, to keeping the dialogue active as we build the global climate finance ecosystem together. And thank you again for being with us throughout this journey. Special thanks to our amazing speakers and to ADGM Academy for their partnership. Wishing you all a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.
Bye.
You too. Thanks. Bye.